Saw dudes, with the release of the Brave Mountaintop, one of my longtime viewers, NeoCypher, asked for our F22 Raptor build. Truth be told, I was already working on a solar Warlock build, but haven't thought of a name for it, so this is perfect. We will use Jotun and Rain of Fire for a constant radiant buff and great DPS rotations. Today's build is all about air superiority, and while we don't have dogfighting in Destiny 2 quite yet, we do have the ability to make it rain hell. Let's get started. Mission briefing is up first. When starting combat, eat your grenade like a marine to get the heat rises buff, then use Phoenix Dive to start the restoration loop. Kill enemies using your solar melee or grenade to extend its duration. If possible, try to kill enemies while you are airborne for extra melee energy gains. After stacking up buff durations, use Jotun or any other solar fusion rifle to get the radiant buff. Use your well for boss DPS, then rinse and repeat. The F22 Raptor comes standard with the Well of Radiance Super. It heals for 100 HP per second, grants 25% increased damage, 50% damage resistance, and converts our weapon damage to super ability damage. The class ability of choice is Phoenix Dive, which synergizes with the Heat Rises buff, one of our aspects. This combination gives us Cure ×2 and Restoration ×2 for 3 seconds upon casting and applies 40 Scorch stacks to enemies within 5 meters. The melee ability is up to you, but for more consistent damage and ignitions, I suggest using Incinerator Snap. Celestial Fire lacks in damage and harder content. The grenade I chose to use was Fusion Grenade for its high damage and ease of use. The aspects for this aircraft are going to be Heat Rises and Icarus Dash. Heat Rises grants us the ability to fire weapons while gliding, gives a passive 20 airborne effectiveness for all weapons, and grants melee ability energy on airborne kills. Heat Rises also lets us consume our grenades like Marines, granting us and nearby allies within 9 meters Cure ×2 and increasing our AE to 70. And finally, modifying our glide to last insanely long. Icarus Dash grants us an airborne dash that travels 8 meters. If Heat Rises is active, we gain an additional charge, but the cooldown increases from 4 seconds to 5 seconds. Finally, airborne multi-kills grants us Cure ×1. Time for the fragments. We will be using Ember of Empyrean, Singeing, Solace, and Tempering. Empyrean causes solar kills to extend restoration and radiant buffs. Singeing grants a 300% additional base class ability regen rate for 3 seconds after applying Scorch to an enemy. Solace causes our restoration and radiant buffs to last 50% longer at base. This will help us get the ball rolling after Phoenix Dive with Heat Rises. Finally, Ember of Tempering causes solar weapon kills to grant us 10 recovery for 8 seconds, up to 30. While active, solar weapon kills will spawn a fire sprite. Okay, now let's cover the Stealth Fighter's armor. On the helmet, I used Harmonic Siphon, Font of Wisdom, and Heavy Ammo Finder. For the gloves, I used Heavy Handed, Impact Induction, and Font of Focus. On the bathrobe was Concussive Dampener, Harmonic Resistance, and a Variable Resistance mod. Rain of Fire had Recuperation and 2 copies of Solar Weapon Surge. Lastly, the Bond had Reaper, Time Dilation, and Bomber. If you have the space, Bomber can be swapped out for distribution. Let's talk about stats. The biggest stat you should worry about is Resilience, for the extra damage resistance. Being airborne makes you an easy target, especially with Icarus Dash and Phoenix Dive on cooldown. The next stats you can prioritize should be Discipline, Intellect, and Recovery. Discipline and Intellect should be capped out at 70 to avoid wasting points. Recovery should also be at 70, but that's because we have Ember of Tempering to cap it out after 3 solar weapon kills. Before moving on to the weapon section, please consider subscribing. It would help me out a lot. Alright, now let's talk about weapons. A little side note, the F22 Raptor comes with one internal M61A2 20mm gun, and the choice between 2 AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, and 6 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles, or 2 AIM-120s and 2 GBU JDAMs air-to-ground munitions. Of course, we don't have access to these weapons, but it would be cool. But we can get pretty damn close. Today's setup will be using Mountaintop, Jotun, and Cataclysmic. Mountaintop will act as our A to G munitions since it doesn't have homing capabilities. The role I suggest going for is hard launch, implosion rounds, or spike grenades, led from gold, and either frenzy or recombination. Before you guys get on me, remember that implosion rounds only has a 0.1% damage bonus over spike grenades, so don't get too worked up. Frenzy is great for the 15% damage buff, handling, and reload bonus, although the reload speed is somewhat wasted due to the Rain of Fire reload. However, you can use this to interchange manual reloading and Icarus Dashing. After firing off a grenade, manually reload, fire, Icarus Dash, fire, then repeat. Of course, you would want to use this in a DPS rotation. If you want to blow stuff up, recombination is great. Each elemental kill will increase the next shot's damage by 10%, up to 100%. You can use this combo to your advantage by firing a souped up grenade, switching to Jotun, killing enemies with elemental final blows, then switching back. Jotun is our A2A weapon, but will honestly be used against grounded enemies most of the time. Jotun fires an explosive projectile that creates a small burning area on hit and applies Scorch. The Catalyst grants the cornered and incandescent perks. This weapon hits very hard, applies Scorch, and benefits from our Radiant and Solar Weapon Surge buffs. Keep in mind that the Scorch application doesn't require kills, and also decreases our Phoenix Dive cooldown drastically. Cataclysmic is her boss DPS weapon and is fairly standard. Since it is a linear fusion rifle, kills with it do grant the radiant buff thanks to Rain of Fire. The role I suggest crafting for this gun is Arrowhead Break, Enhanced Battery, 4th times a Charm, and Bait and Switch. This weapon is perfect with Mountaintop and Rain of Fire since they all incentivize a swap DPS playstyle. Before ending the video, I did want to mention that Jotun can be swapped for Vex Mythoclast, which is classified as a fusion rifle. Running a double special weapon loadout isn't the most sustainable for endgame content, so using this instead can be a lifesaver. Also, Vex Mythoclast comes with an inherent damage buff on kill, has a hard-hitting linear fusion rifle mode, and can activate Radiant fairly easily. Thanks again NeoCypher for suggesting this build and the dope theme behind it. I had a blast coming up with optimizations and testing. There's also a ton of flexibility with this build, so feel free to experiment and share what you came up with in the comments. The rest of the footage is just highlights from a Legend Nightfall from testing. As always, thank you for watching, and happy farming. Stay safe.